This video, the first of three, will cover a 16-page manuscript written by Ira Eaker, a summary he wrote of his time first as commander of 8th Bomber Command from January 1942 until December 1942, and then as commander of 8th Air Force from December 1942 until December 1943. Ira Eaker played a defining role in the creation and expansion of the 8th Air Force in England. During his tenure, the mighty 8th expanded from a force able to dispatch just 18 bombers against rail yards in France, to one that 17 months later was able to dispatch over 700 bombers and 600 escort fighters against targets within Germany. The creation of such a powerful force was not a foregone conclusion. It was not enough to just produce the aircraft. A whole infrastructure and human apparatus had to be created to allow the 8th Air Force to function effectively, and Eaker was intimately involved in the creation process of all this. Ira Eaker was promoted out of command of the 8th Air Force at the end of 1943, heading to the Mediterranean to take command of the Allied air forces in that theater. Before he left, he wrote this document, examining how the 8th Air Force was created and built up, both in terms of manpower, organization, operating method, intelligence gathering, and so on, so that the lessons learned in the creation of the 8th Air Force could be preserved for future American Air Force officers. The undersigned arrived in the United Kingdom with a group of 7 officers on February 20th, 1942. This was the original nucleus of the 8th Air Force to arrive in the United Kingdom. The verbal directive called for the understudy of the RAF Bomber Command, its organization and operational methods, and the initiation, without delay, of the preparations of headquarters establishments, communications, and landing fields, and the necessary logistics setup for the receipt of U.S. bombardment aircraft and units. On December 1st, 1942, the undersigned succeeded Major General Carl Spaatz as Commanding General of 8th Air Force upon his departure for the Mediterranean, and commanded the 8th Air Force into December 31st, 1943. On September 11th, 1943, in addition to the above duties, he was assigned Commanding General of the U.S. Army Air Forces in the United Kingdom. This in order to coordinate the activities of the 8th Air Force and the newly formed 9th Air Force. It is believed that it may serve a useful purpose to recount briefly some of the experiences in building up the 8th Air Force from nothing to its present stature, and to list the pertinent specific conclusions and recommendations. During the progress of this work over the past 2 years, regular reports have been submitted, but there is a certain type of information and experience in the buildup of an Air Force in a new theater, which can be best catalogued and summarized by the commander. In the preparation of this report, the narrative will be brief and include the summaries only. It'll be compiled along the 5 normal general staff functions, and there will be appendices under each section with supporting documents and data. Part 1. Personnel. Section A. Organization. Immediately upon arrival in this theater, an intensive study was begun of the RAF Bomber Command, its operations, and particularly its organization. A careful analysis soon indicated that the organization of the RAF would have an important bearing upon the organization of the American Air Force brought into this theater. This was clearly indicated because of the communication and the airdrome setup already in being. The communications in the airdromes already being constructed, and in many cases completely constructed and established, were provided according to the RAF model. Any change in communications and in the airdromes would necessitate delay, and some of these changes were wholly impossible due to shortages in labor and material. It was determined that our purposes could be accomplished in view of local conditions best by situating our Bomber Command headquarters near the RAF Bomber Command, our Fighter Command headquarters near the RAF Fighter Command, in order that the complete communications with all outlying stations and supporting and coordinating headquarters could be established with the least loss of time and a minimum of material and labor. Excellent facilities were obtained and headquarters were installed and communications completed prior to the arrival of the first units. The organization which was affected called for the 8th Air Force to have 4 subordinate commands: Bomber, Fighter, Air Service, and Training or Composite Command. The Bomber Command was organized into 3 subordinate air divisions, and the air divisions in turn consisted of combat wings. 3 heavy groups on 3 stations to compose 1 combat wing. This organization was a counterpart of the RAF, where the Bomber Command is divided into groups, each composed of a series of bases, each base controlling 3 stations with 2 squadrons on each station, with an initial establishment of 24 aircraft each. Our fighter command was composed of a series of wings along exactly the same line as the RAF command, and for the same very good reasons, to facilitate communication and control which were already established and operational. Although the organization of the 8th Air Force was in part fortuitous, as explained above, the past 2 years of operations have convinced me of the complete soundness of this organization, bearing in mind the conditions in this theater and the enemy opposition which must be encountered. It is sufficiently flexible, and what is most important, it permits a rapid and complete control. It was early realized that there must be some decentralization for administration below Bomber Command. 54 groups, as originally planned, could not be coordinated properly from one headquarters. The breakdown of these 54 groups into 3 air divisions from 15 to 18 groups each has proven to be sound. There was some doubt as to the desirability of the establishment of Combat Wing headquarters. Since the communications for 3 stations were laid through one of these stations, it was very desirable, from a communication standpoint, to follow the RAF setup and to have the control headquarters below the air division and between the air division and the group. The Combat Wing headquarters was, therefore, conceived and tried out, using it as a tactical headquarters only and not as an administrative channel. Our experience has completely proven the soundness of the Combat Wing in the organization. The experience level of the group commander is such that an officer of more age and service is badly needed to supervise 3 groups, ensure their adequate training, and to lead them in operations. It has been most fortunate also that this combat wing of 3 groups, or about 100 bombers operating in one formation, proved to be the proper size of formation for defense in this theater, and likewise the proper size to ensure the destruction of the normal Axis industrial target. This combat wing headquarters corresponds very closely to the brigade headquarters in the infantry. It is purely for coordination and control in combat. The heavy bombardment group had to be fitted into one airdrome. This caused some congestion and the requiring of building of additional hard standings and the building of some additional accommodations. This was early realized and the construction was initiated in time to be ready for each new group on arrival. Our experience has shown that this airdrome saturation is not so great as to interfere with operations. The bomber station was laid out and planned at a time when intensive enemy attack against the airdromes was anticipated. Living accommodations were greatly dispersed. Technical personnel walk or ride bicycles for an average of 7 miles a day in order to get to their places of duty and to get their food and rest. This caused a considerable depreciation of effort, as can be readily understood. It is one of the local conditions normal to this theater and which must be taken into account in evaluating effort here. The organization of the Fighter Command has also worked out very well indeed. It calls for the formation of 3 fighter groups into one fighter wing, and the Fighter Command issuing its operational orders through its wing commanders. This system, which worked out so well with the British in the Battle of Britain, and which has been continued uninterrupted since that time, proved excellent for the employment of American fighters in support of US heavy bombers. Section B. Important personnel factors in this theater. 1. It was early apparent that the loss rate which could be expected in daylight bombardment operations would be at least 5%. This made it absolutely mandatory to designate an operational yardstick. After thorough study, the Air Force commander designated 25 to 30 missions as that yardstick. Succeeding experience has proved this to be necessary and the workable solution. It will be necessary, however, when the German Air Force is depreciated, to revise this yardstick upward. Up to the present time, however, a minimum of 25 missions and a maximum of 30 missions is sound. 2. Leadership. It was early discovered that the group commander is the key combat leader, which is essential in U.S. Air Force operations from this theater. Group commanders have therefore been selected with the greatest care and relieved promptly when below standard. It also early became apparent that this basic combat leader must be given all means required to enable him to carry out his mission. He was, therefore, made the station commander of the base where his wing was located, that he might have all facilities, including transport, supporting special troops, and maintenance services essential for him to carry out his functions. He exercises his administrative control through a station executive and his tactical control through an operations executive. This basic structural organization has proved eminently sound. 3. Training and classification. In organizing and operating a wartime air force composed of such a small percentage of regular army personnel and such a large proportion of individuals normally in civil status, A very important duty devolves on commanders in their A1 sections with regard to the proper classification and assignment of personnel. This is a function which can be easily overlooked or minimized to the very serious detriment of the organization. Regular Army personnel, with long service, are easily classified by records, personal knowledge, and acquaintances of long standing. It is absolutely necessary to set up a machinery to ensure that the professional and technical skills of the wartime personnel be thoroughly evaluated, and that they be placed on duties as nearly commensurate with their skills and past experience as is possible. This has been recognized in the 8th Air Force, and its personnel selection, as well as the personnel selections of the command, have specialized in trade testing personnel and in making every effort to ensure appropriate assignment. Thereafter, the day-to-day training becomes an important item. It has been demonstrated in this Air Force that instructions in the basic qualities, which are the minimum for the high-type soldier and the able officer, are prerequisites to proper performance in any task. Officer and soldier training in the military fundamentals was therefore stressed. This included the enforcement of strict regulations with respect to dress, deportment, saluting, relations between officers and men, and the relations between the military and the civil communities. It was found that the best soldier makes the best fighting man in the air as well as on the ground. Combat leaders and combat crew members who were soldierly and well drilled in the fundamentals very early went to the top and won greatest distinction in air combat. 4. Morale. The morale in the 8th Air Force has always been exceptionally high. The spirit and will for combat and the enthusiasm for the daily task by all personnel has been very evident. This is one of the great prides I take in my tenure first as Bomber Commander and later as 8th Air Force Commander. Practically all observers from the zone of the interior who have visited units and stations in this Air Force have commented first on the high state of morale and next on the harmony which prevails between commands and between individuals within units. There are several discoverable reasons for this excellent state of affairs. The first and probably the foremost lies in the fact that the Air Force was in combat against the enemy. Its constituent members took great pride in the fact that they were the only Americans fighting the Germans in Germany. They felt they'd been entrusted with the task by their fellow Americans of meeting, matching, and overcoming the most powerful air force in the world. That has undoubtedly been a tremendous incentive to high morale. Another reason which is believed to have been important was the proper instruction of officers and the insistence that the officers become real leaders. The third factor lay in the tremendous task to be performed. It took long hours of hard work to accomplish the assignments. Each man felt that he was performing a real task and all were kept busy. The insistence on the provision of suitable living accommodations and adequate recreational facilities, and particularly the high requirements enforced with respect to messes, post-exchange, special service facilities, all played an important part. The special service officers, and particularly the remarkable and wholehearted cooperation of the American Red Cross, have proven big factors in maintaining the morale of our combat and maintenance crews. One of the paramount tenets of faith instilled in all commanders has been that all command and staff echelons exist for but one purpose, and that is to control and support the combat crews in combat. Instilling this feeling into every commander, coupled with prompt weeding out of ineffective officers and non-commissioned officers, is counted as one of the prime reasons for a good sound fighting spirit maintained often under very adverse conditions. The thoroughgoing support of the theater commander and the commanding general of the services of supply and their staffs has been one of the principal reasons for the success of the 8th Air Force. Our personnel have felt that they had the understanding and encouragement of the theater commander and his staff, and that all of the agencies of the service of supply have done everything possible to help. The attitude of the English people and the armed forces in Great Britain has been of inestimable help in building up the 8th Air Force as an efficient combat unit and of inducting it into this theater. The people of Great Britain in every community without exception have been friendly, cooperative, and congenial. The leaders in the armed forces, particularly in the RAF, have been most kindly and helpful in every way. There has been no suspicion or jealousy, antagonism, or competition between the US 8th Air Force and the armed services of Great Britain. All have worked together in greatest harmony and accord. This I count of paramount importance, not only to the progress of the war, but particularly for the prospect of harmony between our two nations in the years of peace to follow.